Let's go.
Yo, what's up, trenders? Welcome back to another episode of Trending Up. And today, if you are watching us live on Facebook or YouTube, or later on after this, you will see that we have a very special guest, Garrison.
Yes, we do.
I was
What's
trying to
up,
give
y'all?
you a wrestler name, Garrison something Hayes, but do you have a like a
No, G Money
Preferred-
Hayes. I don't know.
G
I don't
Money
know.
Hayes.
G Money Hayes?
I don't know how I got that name. I think it just rhymes or it's something. It
Yeah.
sounds good. It's,
Right.
You know
So-
who gave me that? I'm gonna say, who gave me that? Abner Sanchez called me
okay.
G Money Hayes.
I could see that. G Money. I will tell you, and I think I mentioned this another time. I was in the campus ministries office with Garrison Hayes when what dean was it? Was it Earhart? I think it was Earhart. He came through. He looked at Garrison. He said, "Garrison, you are the face of Southern." And so it's like,
Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
all
That's
right,
amazing.
yeah. So Garrison, you are always obviously a man that the people look up to, that we look up to. So we appreciate you coming on.
Appreciate you guys.
So yeah, we're just gonna get right into it. We don't want to take too much of everyone's times, but obviously we know what's going on. We've been going on a conversation over the last couple of weeks on relationships, right? And so we've been talking more about romantic relationships and stuff. But now we're going, I guess we're just taking this side step.
We're taking it. No, it's not even a
Go ahead.
side step. We're actually taking it to the corporate level. So society is literally a corporate dynamic of relationships and how you manage them. And so today's topic is really important as we talk about what's going on in our country, where it started, and how it's going to go forward. Right. Yeah, so we're very excited to have this conversation. Excited in the sense that we feel it as a needed conversation. It sucks to have, if you've been following us since our beginning, we had this conversation almost a year ago with Garrison. We were talking about what it's like to be Black in America. We talked about the Latino and Black Latinx community connection. And it's unfortunate that here we are again, a year later, still trying to, I guess no other words, educate and really expose white supremacy and racial discrimination, all that. You could just go down the list. So I guess just from the beginning, I'll just pose this question to whoever wants to answer it. What is going on right now? Obviously, people are checking the news. Everything's been COVID for the last 90, 80 days. And the last week or two, we've really had a spike in a different conversation. So if anybody wants to just take a stab at it and just share, hey, what's going on?
I'll just say that, we are, it's been said a number of ways, and I echo, this is a common kind of saying that I've been hearing, and I think it's accurate, that the pandemic that's been going on for 400 years has rivaled the pandemic that's been going on for 4 months. And we see the pandemic of racism and the blighting effects of racism, particularly anti-Black racism, at work, and taking up the necessary space, the space that it deserves to take in our national conversation. Whether it's Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed back in February, Breonna Taylor, who was killed just 2 months ago, and George Floyd, who was killed, I think, 2 weeks ago now. There is no video of Breonna Taylor's killing, but that killing, which hasn't gotten enough attention, honestly, is profoundly offensive. And not, if you aren't aware, Louisville, Kentucky, cops burst into her apartment, thinking that they were doing a drug bust, I believe. They'd actually already apprehended, some officers had already apprehended the suspect in that case that they were looking for, but they bust in on a no knock, which is illegal. They did not knock. They bust in with guns blazing and end up shooting and killing her. And even shooting and wounding her boyfriend, who shot back. And it's just this mess of cops being incompetent, and her life didn't matter enough for them to knock. It didn't matter enough for them to arrest the officers who killed her, even though the way in which they entered her apartment is illegal. And I know that's not the center of this conversation, but it doesn't get enough. So at the top, I just want to say her name, Breonna Taylor, was killed. And while we're out marching for Ahmaud Arbery, and while we're out marching for George Floyd, and we ought to be marching for those individuals, we ought to also be marching for Breonna Taylor, who was killed unjustly.
Agreed.
Yeah,
100%.
we're gonna the topic of police is gonna come up throughout this conversation, and we need to understand one thing behind that is first, when you take on the mantle of being a policeman and being part of the institution to protect each other, right? That's in theory. That's what's supposed to happen. There comes a great responsibility, and then accountability comes with responsibility. Right. So if you want something to work a certain way, you have to have accountability behind that. So, and when an error happens, you have to rectify that in order to keep that responsibility. So one of the biggest outrages that's happening too is a lack of accountability. And that's why you mentioned the word incompetency. Like that's why you have to have competency in what you're doing. And when you don't, you need to take on the responsibility of being responsible for your action. You can't just say, "Oh, Breonna Taylor, like I'm sorry, we thought this is gonna escalate, and we had to shoot first because we felt endangered, and I'm sorry that you actually weren't a threat to us, and now other things happen." No, that's the point. The point is you have to be competent to take responsibility. And I think that's something that's going to come up a lot throughout this conversation.
And I think we have to be unafraid to hold the institutions, and I mean, even in our community, right? If the mayor is doing something wrong, if you're sheriff or one of your teacher, like you have every ability as part of this institution, as part of this organization, as part of this body to say, hey, there's a wrongdoing, right? We're pastors, right? And if someone comes in, they're like, "Yo, Pastor Sebastian has been," I don't want to say anything.
Right. No, but I hear you.
but if Pastor Sebastian or hey, they come to you, hey, the first elder or this elder, this deacon is not acting right. We think he's taking funds, or we think that he's being inappropriate, or whatever it is, right? You can't be okay, but he's just one of the elders. We have one bad elder, but the rest are good. It's like, no. First of all, we can't. No. That's not okay. As a pastor, I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, I mean, what about the other 10 elders that we got? We're good. So we have to be okay with questioning and holding accountable the people that we have over us, because they're representing us. They're for the people, right? And so,
and then you have to ask yourself, because we are not talking about an individual in the truest sense of the word. We're talking about someone who is a part of what Edgar what I believe to be correctly identified as a system or an institution.
Right.
So you have to ask yourself, even if there is one bad apple,
right,
or one bad police officer, that's the analogy for police officers. One bad apple.
Yeah.
What allows for him to be or her to be protected? What allows for them to remain in their position of authority? And even when people we know Chauvin, the guy who kneeled on George Floyd's neck, he had 18 complaints filed against him. I believe 6 of which, or at least a number of which, were brutality complaints against him. What allows for an individual
to still be on the street,
to still be on the police force? I mean, at some point, we have to acknowledge that it's not just one. There are at least 2, because his superior made sure that he remained on the force. And if it's not 2, it has to at least be 3, because someone else witnessed that and didn't file a complaint. And if it's not 3, I mean, it probably could very well be the entire office. And I'm not here to say that we should, abolish the police or anything of that sort. I am here to say that we need to consider, how do we hold the police officers who are bad accountable? And if the people surrounding them, if the other officers, the police chief and the unions aren't holding these officers accountable, they too are culpable in the situation.
And I think that's really, really important to grasp is, for example, if someone, especially in churches, because churches have notoriously been known to move pastors or priests around when they have been found or accused and even found to be guilty of a sin, right? Of a horrible action, and they just get moved around. And no, the church needs to be accountable. So, as Seventh-day Adventists, we're Protestants. It's easy to point at the Catholic Church that has struggled with sexual abuse and be like, the Pope knew about this, the priest knew about this, but then we are not able to translate that to even our men and women who have taken on the mantle to protect our society and have failed. It's not messed up, failed.
Yeah.
So we have to show, in order to be loving, we need to show justice needs to come out, and we need to be just when called to.
Yeah, and then speaking about race relations, right? This is kind of I think we highlighted a little bit last time in the last podcast a year ago. I think it was around actually maybe July, August, but because I think it was after we had talked about Baltimore in that podcast. So I'm sure there's so many things that were going on.
Yeah,
I think it was something that the president said about Baltimore.
Yeah. That's right. I remember I was in Chicago for a wedding, so that's like it's around that time of year.
Right. So the meaning we're saying this is because it's been the reality of the black community for so long, right? I mean, I'm glad that there's this public outrage at what we saw, at least in the video of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, and people are like, how can he stand on his neck for 8 minutes like that? And then you see the officers next to them just simply watching this, and though they may not have any, but people would say racist intent, I think at still point they still have devalued the life of George Floyd too in a racist way. But just to sit by idly and not stand up and say, yo, hey, let's not do this. This is not good. This is the reality of the black community for so long, right, Garrison? And I know I'm sure it's painful to have to relive it and re-experience it every single day. But yeah, I don't know if you want to kind of highlight a little bit of what, kind of how this. I don't even know what kind of question I'm asking. I'm just gonna put that's it. I hear what you're asking. Yeah.
And it's there. The reality of I'll be very straightforward. The reality of the black community is that there have been anti-black narratives distributed, ideas, racist anti-black narratives about who we are, about what we are, that have been distributed for so long that black people and non-black people find it entirely untenable. I mean, it's just unreasonable to believe black people.
Right.
That's for me, in my opinion, at its baseline.
Right.
People don't believe black people. So when you make the observation that this has been going on for a long time, I think about Frederick Douglass or W.E.B. Du Bois, or Arna Bontemps, or Langston Hughes, or James Baldwin, or Martin Luther King Jr., or Ralph David Abernathy, who's in this photo right over here with MLK. And I think about John Lewis, and moving it more contemporary, I think about Ibram Kendi and Tiny T. Coates and Michael Eric Dyson and Toni Morrison and Audre Lorde. And we can name so many black intellectuals, so many black authors who have given word and witness to the experience of black people. And yet nothing changes. And I think nothing changes for several reasons. But one of the reasons is because people don't believe black people. They just think that we're just lying about our experience, that we're just making this stuff up. Because if you believed us, if you believed what we had to say about the way police officers treat us, if you believed what we had to say about redlining, if you believed what we had to say about the way in which we are not protected by the laws of this land the way that others, particularly white people, are protected by the laws of this land, you would hopefully, now I believe that you're a good person, surely you would desire to seek, you seek change for black brothers and sisters. I think to solve racism, especially anti-black racism, you've got to start believing black people. We have given word and witness for 300 at least years, and nothing has changed. You really have to wonder. I was listening to a podcast just yesterday. The NPR Code Switch podcast did a wonderful episode about what does seeing black men and women killed on camera do for us. They pose a really provocative question, because they essentially kind of conclude that it must do nothing for us, because as you say, it's been a year since we had this conversation last, and within the last month, I can tell you of 3 killings, videos of black men being killed, black women being killed, reports of black men and women being killed, and there's no substantive legislation or substantive change being put forth to ensure that this doesn't happen. We aren't standardizing policing practices.
Right.
We don't have independent oversight for police departments and agencies. The police often police themselves. So they, of course, give themselves all of the benefit of the doubt. The police are still able to say, hey, my life qualified, my life was threatened. So that gave me all of the right to take this person's life. We've done nothing to change the situation. And I would argue that that's because we don't believe Black people.
Wow.
Huh.
No words, man. That's crazy.
So, what I've seen, throughout the last few weeks, as we've really, especially with Ahmaud, this video came out like a month ago, but it happened the month before or 2 months before in February, and the person that actually really, this is hearsay, but I'm sure I can find better, chronicles of this, but the video was released to justify actually that this person, this Black man, that Ahmaud was guilty of stealing, right? And then this video would actually protect the two white men that killed this young man just running through a neighborhood. Which, it's interesting. I myself, I live in a part of Buffalo that's more affluent. And I always joke I'm the poorest person on my street. I'm the one that does my own home repairs. Everybody else like hires it out and so forth. But the point that I was going to count on is that I actually run through my street. And in the past I've ran with my son, and so I push the cart, and he's he's in front of me, and I run, and that can be more of a family kind of environment. But I ran one time without my son, and I actually ran with all Black attire. I had a black hoodie, I had a black joggers, and black shoes. I like the color black, right? Ironic for a pastor. But anyways, I was running out there, and I remember someone stopping. They were mowing their lawn and then stopping and then just looking at me. And I'm not Black. I'm brown. I'm Mexican, right? I'm what you would consider, especially using general statements. We need to stop using general statements. I think that is one of the worst things. We're going to mention it. Language, how we describe what is going on, and people have said about my ethnicity that we are a bunch of drug dealers just trying to come to this country and rape and steal and sell drugs. That's what people say about Mexicans. Right. So I'm running, right? And I just thought, why would this man stop and look at me? And yes, people can protect their homes, and I mean, I'm all for that. I'm all for that. But could there be a sense of profiling based on the color of my skin, what I'm wearing, and the fact that I'm going through a neighborhood where people are living? And obviously you want to protect where you're at, but why do we react that way? That's one of the biggest why. And could it be general statements such as Black people shouldn't be trusted, Mexicans are drug dealers, these kind of things? Are these things in our people's minds warranted or not? Why? How did they get there? And that is what we're really trying to address, is the rhetoric behind how people look at minorities. I have a lot of white friends, and there is God created both white, Black, Mexican, brown, whatever. He created them, and they each have dignity. So with that being said, we need to understand that the dignity of a person is not totally dependent on their skin, but on who their creator is. So if Ahmaud was killed, and we can think, oh, this is okay because he could have been a robber, or when it comes to Floyd, he could have forged a check. If we're okay with them dying, what does that say about how we value life? And that is something that we need to see a common denominator within our society. Is Black men and women have been killed, murdered by those that we have chosen to defend ourselves. Yeah. So why is this happening?
Yeah.
And this is the situation we're in.
Yeah.
You know, you asked a really good question that triggered something for me. You said, you know, like why is it that, you know, we think about, say, Mexicans this way or Black people this way? And, you know, I think social psychologists would, you know, identify what's called mental models as at least part of the reason that we get into these ruts. It's kind of a natural phenomenon. Mental models help us to operate efficiently in this world. For instance, when I get into a car in America, I know that the steering wheel is here, and like right over here is where I'm going to change the gears, whether it's automatic or, you know, I'm probably going to change the gears here or maybe here. Those are mental models that help me operate efficiently. I can go from car to car to car, and I'm always going to generally know what I'm doing in the car because I'm easily oriented to what's happening in the vehicle, right? I have a mental model of what a vehicle looks like, and that helps me operate more efficiently. We do this with people often. This is just the way that our minds work to help us to move through life without having to restart our cognitive process at every single step. If every time I walked out the door, everything was new to me, I would be exhausted. Everything would just be so exhausting. So we do this, and it's natural, and it's not inherently wrong. But when we do this to people, that's what we call prejudice, where I say, okay, this is a Mexican, so this, and this thing must be true about him. And maybe it is sometimes. Maybe that helps me kind of orient myself to you as a Mexican person. And it makes it easy for us to kind of have relations. And I know where to kind of like, you know, I know how you tick a little bit, right? And that's helpful.
Yeah.
But when it becomes unhelpful is when we allow those things to be negative. One, we have all these negative preconceptions about entire groups of people, but that's still prejudice. I can have prejudice against white people. I can have prejudice against Mexicans. I can even have prejudice against Black people. I see a Black person in a hoodie. That's a criminal. That person's more violent. I don't want to mess with them. They might be a drug dealer. They probably have a gun, right? I can have these mental models in my mind, these negative things. And again, that's prejudice. But when that prejudice begins to be amplified by the media, when that prejudice begins to be codified by our legal system, when that prejudice begins to be amplified by the president of the United States, who says that all Mexicans are rapists and drug dealers, and that's when it moves from being prejudice to being racist. Because racism is not just prejudice; it's prejudice plus institutional power, right? So the institutional power that allows my prejudice to be inflicted upon people without impunity, that's racism. So the prejudice is like, oh, Mexicans are coming over here and they're taking our jobs and they're da-da-da-da-da, and there's all this ridiculous stuff, right? But racism is saying, okay, so now we're going to detain them at the border. We're going to release ICE to go get like actual legal Americans to like and lock them up. That's racism at work. And we see, of course, that working with Black people. I mean, you see, for instance, bringing it back to the conversation that we're having, Ahmaud Arbery is out on a jog, just like you, Edgar. And prejudice says, I see a Black man running down the street. He must have stole something. That's, you know, Gregory and Travis McMichael. That's their prejudiced minds at work. But it becomes, of course, that's racist. Those are racist ideas because they are backed by a system of power that then allows for the McMichaels to go and kill Ahmaud Arbery and not to be arrested, for several of the law enforcement officials there, the DAs and the prosecutors, to say nothing that happened was wrong, for them to be essentially protected. And we're only hearing about this. We're only outraged about this today because there was a video. As a matter of fact, I saw the New York Times article when it first came out about Ahmaud Arbery. I read the case and I said, this is ridiculous. But I mean, but did it stick with me? I'll be honest with you. It didn't stick with me because there was no video to show what really happened. It was just this very fuzzy vignette of someone was out running, suspected of a crime, chased down and shot. I don't know what's happening here. I can't say with any certainty, but when you see the video, it allows you to have like clarity that like, whoa, this is wrong. And yet there is a system in place to protect these individuals from repercussions for their actions. If there was no video, the McMichaels, the individuals who killed Ahmaud Arbery would still be roaming free to this day.
Right.
Wow.
That speaks to our
I think that brings to the reality of the Black community. Imagine there are throughout society, there are things that happen to both white and Black and every ethnicity. But when it comes to the reality of the Black community, when you continually see these videos coming up of videos is a newer thing for our society, right? Because now everybody has a HD camera. But in our time today, the reality of the Black community is, how do you react to watching these videos of a police officer putting their knee on the neck of an individual that was already apprehended? It's not that he was fighting, and he accidentally knocked him out and now he's dead. He was pressing upon this man's neck that is the most vulnerable spot in your body, really, but because of the airway and so forth. And how does the Black community react to that? How did that make you feel, Garrison? And how does the Black community react to that? Because I think that's important to highlight, because it's going to connect to the later part of our discussion.
So for me, I'll be honest, I've not watched the video to this day.
I haven't either.
Yeah. I don't have a reason to. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't make me any more mad than I already am. I don't need help getting upset about white supremacy or anti-Blackness. I don't need help knowing that police officers target Black people continually, off camera, on camera. It doesn't matter. And so I haven't seen the video, but what it does do is it reignites whatever dormant indignation, as our indignation and our passion wanes over time. It reignites that, whatever has gone to sleep over time. I might still be, angry and ready to go and like, this needs to change, but whatever bit I've lost over time, it reignites it. The interesting thing, of course, is that George Floyd's murder comes, after this time in COVID, with COVID-19, after this pandemic, where we see the Black community devastated by this pandemic. I mean, we see the Black community absolutely hammered by COVID-19. Of course, in the midst of that, we get Ahmaud Arbery. In the midst of that, we get Breonna Taylor. And in the midst of that, we get Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper in Central Park. So there is this context within which these protests are coming out, and the Black community is saying, wait, something needs to change, because it's been revealed that on a few different levels, America is failing the Black community on a healthcare level, of course, on a policing level, justice system at large is failing us. And of course, we know that the president is not for Black people. I don't know who will see this. Maybe they'll disagree with me. I don't care. You cannot say Black Lives Matter and at the same time be a Donald Trump supporter. You can't mean Black Lives Matter in the truest sense and be a Donald Trump supporter, because Donald Trump is not for Black lives, period. And so the context within which we exist has ignited this fire. That's why you see tens of thousands of peaceful but indignant protesters out in the streets of major cities around the country.
So would it be safe to say it's what's the saying? The hair that broke the camel's back. I think some people say, "Oh, what's the big fuss?" Like, someone died. A lot of it's like if you're injured and someone hits you right where you've been injured before. How do you react to that? Continually. It's gonna hurt way more. It's gonna, anyways. We see that happening today.
I mean, I think Martin Luther King Jr. and I'm gonna let Sebastian. I know Sebastian trying to jump in.
I'm learning.
MLK talks about the phases of Black suffrage and the Black civil rights push. And I have the book here. I'll highlight it towards the end as one that I think everyone should read. But he talks about how white Americans can normally get on board with the Black suffrage push to stop being brutalized. What I mean is that, slavery was a brutal thing for the Black community. And there are plenty of liberal to moderate whites who could say, no, that's wrong. Like, let's take the whip out of the sheriff's hand, MLK says. Let's make sure that we aren't, brutalizing these people. Let them live in their own communities, let them have their jobs at their own places or working for us, but we don't want to brutalize them.
Right.
So he talks about, this is, back in the 60s, he was writing this and saying that whenever there is a brutalization of the Black body, whenever that is made public, you will see a swell of white moderates and white liberals who want to get on board with the push to stop brutalizing Black people. That's phase one, though. Phase two, however, loses the white support. Phase two is the push for equity and equality.
Right.
And when white people realize that there is something to be lost, privilege, so that their Black brothers and sisters can gain equity, then all of a sudden that passion and that push seems to subside. It seems to go away. And I say all of that, you say the straw that broke the camel's back. I think that there are thousands upon thousands, millions of Black and brown people who are ready to protest yesterday, who are ready to protest 3 months ago, and are out there pushing for change, who are on the front lines of advocating for Black and brown lives. But what we're seeing is a coming together of not just Black people. I went out to protest just yesterday, and I was of course delighted to see the diversity of the people who are out there marching for the life of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and others who are marching for justice. But I could not help but I couldn't get MLK's words out of my mind that this is a push, as he would call, for the cessation of brutalization. He would say this is a push for us to stop brutalizing Black bodies. And where I think he would look skeptically, I think he would look kind of like a little warily, waiting for that same group of people, that cosmopolitan group of people, to be there for the push for equity and equality for Black and brown lives.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good. A lot of thoughts, man. I was trying to jump in, but no, I'm learning a lot. There's a lot that we can go from here, but I think it's an amazing moment now. I'm really excited for our generation and the next generations to come. I was talking to a friend last night, Jonathan Montplaisir, and who's in South Texas, and being from South Texas, it's very interesting, to see that you would say, hey, we have similar struggles, being immigrants, being looked down upon, like Edgar was saying earlier, saying, that Mexicans are this, that Latinos are coming and taking our jobs, just along the same lines of what is said about the Black community. But a lot of times when it comes to actually, beyond, even in protests, a lot of people won't jump in and do that, unless it's touching and it's talking about detention centers in South Texas, or you're talking about, other stuff like that, about ICE, protesting. But we don't really, there's not a lot of big coalition between minority groups, right? And so something I think that's really cool, you highlighted, Garrison, was to see that, at least the young people, they're like, hey, we're going out, we're going to go change, we're going to go. But that's such a great point. I was just, in reading, and I'm sure I'll mention it later, Stand from the Beginning here by Ibram Kendi. Man, this is a go-to book on the definitive history of racist ideas in America.
Powerful book.
Yeah, powerful book, big book. But now that I have the quarantine, man, it's just, I can't stop reading it, because it's so sad, because so much of what's happened in the last hundreds of years is still happening today. It's just morphed, right? But the underlying racism and the ideas and the beliefs, the language that people use that continue to degrade and devalue, dehumanize the lives of Black and minorities is still seen today, right? But yeah, how easy it is. I was thinking about, how he makes the distinction between segregationist and assimilationist, right? And how much throughout history, we've always, applauded all these people that were for, stopping segregation and stopping slavery. But they still held racist beliefs, which blew my mind, because I'm like, man, Abraham Lincoln, I thought he was the OG. He was cool.
Yeah, for sure.
And then you're looking back, and all these guys, even, Booker T. Washington, as you were saying, W.D. Bowie, all these people, that you were like, man, these guys were founders of the pioneers. And you're looking, and they're still communicating in ways. And I think this is the idea, right? The importance of language, communicating in ways that are still racist, right? Even, I'm embarrassed to say, when I look back, I was going back to hear the podcast from last year and trying to figure out my language of how I portrayed maybe the Black community, or even how I view myself, because there's so many embedded, deeply rooted racist beliefs that we hold that play out, right? And so I think it's really looking at, the work of Ibram Kendi, and you mentioned so many other work, right, where it's changed over the years. Yeah, we don't have people picking cotton, unless you're talking about now, what is it, the prison industry, right? That it's just a morph, right? You don't have what we used to have, right, before pre-Civil War and all that. But I mean, we can argue that it's just different now. It looks different. It has a different name, but it's still the same underlying thing. So unless we really address those things, and that's what's, hopefully this momentum that the youth and the younger generations have can carry over to the voting booths, can carry over to going and asking for better representation in our community, right? Can carry over. One thing that you said, it didn't really click, but I heard it in the podcast when I listened to it again. It's just the importance of being on the census, right? Of getting on and saying, hey, do the census so that your community knows who they are representing, right? Because then they can be like, oh, we don't have any Black people in Palm Coast. Yep. There is no. If you went to the protest yesterday, you would see there's a lot of Black people, a lot of minorities in Palm Coast, and so it's as important to be on the census. So a lot of thoughts, but I think the language that we use and how we perpetuate these ideas, right? I see it even in today's age. Chantal had a conversation with someone, and she was a white passing Latina, right? I'm a white passing Latino that for many years I was ashamed of too, which then speaks to, kind of like you were saying, being prejudiced against white. And I don't want to be white because it, but she was a white passing Latina, and Chantal is an Afro Latina, right? Even that was revolutionary for me, because I was like, no, you're just Latina. And she's like, no, I'm Afro Latina. But like, no, for me as a Latino, we don't see color, right? But the reality is that Chantal is an Afro Latina, and for many times, even in the Latino community, we have seen how you just deny a part of you because it's degraded, and we bought the narrative that Black is bad, that Black is subhuman, right? Black is sin, as some people think that was a mark that Cain got, which is ridiculous. And so to cut it short, so this person mentions to Chantal, she's like, I'm just glad I'm a white skinned Latina because I don't have to deal with all these things. Chantal was like, literally, we just spoke, I'm an Afro Latina, like, so. There's just so much that needs to be unpacked, not just in when we protest, but even the very ideas that we hold, right? What we believe, and as communicators and preachers of the word, how we communicate and share this word, right? I think it's something so telling that the God of the universe that came, Jesus Christ, in Philippians 2, he emptied himself. It's a beautiful word there. He left his privileges in heaven to become a man like us, right? And so I think this is a call to the white community, to white passing Latinos, to Latinos and Asian, whoever it is that's listening, to check our privileges and say, hey, God is a God of infinite. If Garrison says, hey, I'm not getting the same amount of opportunities for education, just because I'm extending a hand, and not as a white savior, but as hey, this is just equality. This is we see disparity. Doesn't mean he's taking for my chances. No. Right. We're trying to uplift everyone together. That's the purpose of the gospel, right? To uplift everyone, to help everyone else. Right. So this book here, and I think that's beyond anything that Garrison can say, because he can speak from his experience. But as he's been saying, we don't believe Black people. And this is one thing I even heard it in my own family, right? It's like in thinking about the LGBTQ plus community, right? I've never felt these attractions, so it can't possibly be true. That's exactly I haven't had this, I've gone jogging with, but I've never gotten looked at or stopped or anything like that. So it possibly can't be true. Right. All my interactions with police officers has been healthy. Right. So it can't possibly be true that they're getting beat up. Right. It isn't until we step back and we say, maybe there's more to the picture that I don't see. And I think that's the call that Christianity, that many people have missed, that God in not exposing and sharing everything that there is to know about the world and humanity and life has made it so that we have to humble ourselves and say, we don't know everything, right? And we've done a bad job in the church because we pretended as Adventists that we do know everything. So I think it's important to be educated and really see our blind spots, because we perpetuate this system of racism and discrimination that we're so against without even knowing, because we're not checking or we're not believing others that are experienced in this. And so just a little ranting tangent, but
no, that was good.
yeah.
I think that there's a lack of empathy in our society today. A lot of tribalism. I'm this, I'm that, I'm blue, I'm red. When it comes to politics, and there's a lot of lack of empathy if you differ from what I believe is right. And I believe that this is something that comes into this situation. So as a Latino, I understand my perspective. How I grew up, but and the limitations and the experiences. I once had someone tell me that if I were to knock on their door, and I don't have a beard, okay, I just have a little scruff. I was told by a Christian that if I were to knock on their door the way that I look today, I had just a little bit more scruff, that she would think I was a terrorist.
Right. Even the language we use for Arabs and Muslims,
just like that, right? And I'm like, what? So when someone else says, I've been racially profiled, someone was racist to me, I can't say, I don't believe you. That's not right. Is that the loving thing to say? No, because empathy is like, wait, what do you mean about that?
Tell me more. Yeah.
Tell me more. And then, yeah, they were racist. Oh, yeah, you can't just give the benefit of the doubt to say, no. There's a quote that one of the pastors on my, that we communicate in my conference said.
It's a good quote.
Something else, yeah, it's really good, but I can't find it now in the time. But essentially, the devil wants good men to stay quiet. That's all that the enemy would want us to do. And you can be a good person and be like, yeah, Black people should have equality, shouldn't be brutalized. But if you're quiet about it, that's as bad as those that are loud about it.
Right. Yeah.
And I want to just add, there's a conversation, right? Well, why are we protesting for Black people when there's so many other things? What about Blue Lives Matter? And then I'm like, what frustrates me about that, and people that bring up those points, is that they're trying to take away from the Black Lives Matter initiative. We're seeing there's a problem that's from the inception, even before America was founded, there has been a problem with racism towards the Black community. But even then, they're trying to take distract from that, right? And so they'll bring up, other stuff, but many times they're just trying to distract. They're not even aware of what's going on with, Muslims in China or refugees in Syria or Mexicans at the border, and they're not going to stand up for it. They just say, hey, you're disrupting my feed. I don't want to be feeling guilty and shameful for maybe being a part of the system. And I think of that quote that says, I'm not sure. I think it's MLK, right? That says that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think the inverse is true, right? Justice anywhere is gonna encourage get justice. So I'm thinking about it, right? If we start fighting for Black rights and equality among this nation in a systemic way, in a positive way, the same thing then those racist policies will have to change for immigrants that are coming from refugee countries, right? And it's going to change to the language that we talk about Mexicans, where we're seeing, oh wait, I'm not only being racist towards Black Americans, but I'm being racist against Mexican Americans and Syrian Americans. And so instead of seeing it as like, oh, you're seeing this as this is the beginning of something that can really overlap and impact so many other things that we're seeing. And so it's just so sad that you don't see those people that are against this aren't equally vocal about other stuff, right? They just want you to stop talking about it because you're infringing on my right to feel good at all times. I don't know what it is, right? So I think it's very important for us to bear with our brothers and sisters and see that a step in the right direction isn't just for the Black community, it's for everyone. This is going to impact every single thing. And even if it didn't, I would want to be able to say, hey, I was a part of this movement, and as a Christian, I believe that all people should be on the same equal footing as Jesus Christ, and the gospel responds to that. So, Garrett, I don't know if you have a thought there or want to keep moving kind of to see for just a couple of seconds here. I don't even know if we should talk about the church response, but real quickly, I'll just highlight a little bit. Obviously, we're talking from a Seventh-day Adventist perspective. The church has typically been very slow and reluctant to release something that truly addresses specifically what is going on. We saw that in World War II. We've seen it in many other parts where they post the fact. They're like, oh yeah, by the way, we were never for this, right? Or we were against this. They were not immediate to call out different things. And so what are your thoughts, Garrison, Edgar, on the church's response during this time at this moment? Have we done a good job? Has been pitiful?
I kind of have two thoughts here. I mean, one is, what I can only, decipher what is being done in other places based on some of the things I've seen from pastors. Like, I think one of the more valuable, I don't even know if I should say it that way. One of the more interesting, places on Facebook that I have the privilege of being a part of is this is a group with a number of pastors, and seeing some of the responses there they've been encouraging. Seeing some of those responses, they've been a bit discouraging at times. So, seeing the way people respond to it, has been really kind of, in some ways, concerning, honestly. For many people, there's a lot of energy spent on when talking about these protests. There's a lot of energy spent on like, oh, the looters and the violent people and the rioters, quote unquote, right? And we know without a shadow of this is, empirical, fact. We know that there are tens of thousands of peaceful protesters around the country. I mean, peaceful protesters outnumber at a significant rate any of the very small minority of individuals who are doing violence or who are looting or rioting, whatever that means, right? Like that, those individuals who we certainly don't agree with, the violent people and the people who are tearing stuff up, those people are in the extreme minority. And yet they take up an outsized space in our conversation on what's happening out there. And my single point, when thinking about these, pastors particularly, because we have a huge responsibility to use our voices for good. When thinking about pastors, I find it interesting that so many pastors are able to do the grace-filled logical maneuvering to say, yes, there are bad cops out there, but we know that we believe that those bad cops are in the minority, and the majority of cops who are out there want to do good. We can make that distinction.
Right.
But we can't seem to make the same distinction when it comes to those who are protesting. And I think that's a major issue. I've seen a number of conferences release statements where honestly they've spent far too much time making sure that they position themselves as like, oh, we're here for peace and we're against any violence, and we're
right.
But you don't do that same thing when you're talking about police officers. Hey, wait, we're here, for good cops, but honestly, the bad cops are the one. I don't see anybody making statements about bad cops because they don't want to center that in the conversation about police officers, and I understand why. So we have to ask ourselves, why are we centering violence in the conversation about this righteous and just protest movement? Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think it's really important that we get out there, that we lend our presence. We march alongside those who are leading a righteous movement for justice. I think it's important that we support them with our voices.
Yes.
And I think it's also important that we support them financially. I happen to live in proximity to DC, where our protests are taking place right there in front of the White House. DC doesn't have a cash bail system. So when someone is arrested, there's no bail to get them out. That's not how this system works in particular. But in cities across the nation, when someone, a peaceful protester or otherwise, is arrested, often there's money that has to be put up for them to be released from jail.
Right.
It's important that churches are willing to create a bail fund for those who have been unjustly arrested for exercising their constitutional duty to protest the injustices that are taking place in this world. Of course, these protesters need supplies like water and, you know, fruit bars and Nutri-Grain bars and like granola bars, and like that stuff is important. They're out there in the hot sun. Sunscreen is important. If you're in a place where they are using tear gas or pepper gas or whatever it is to disperse these crowds, buy milk and or you know, baking soda and water to make sure that people can protect themselves against what's happening out there with these, you know, police officers who are antagonizing these crowds. So what do we need to do? I think we need to be engaged in this fight. And I'll say this last thing before allowing you guys to jump in. I know I kind of
you're good.
Here. I'll say that, you know, earlier in this week, several cities across the nation were enacting curfews, 7 p.m. curfews here in DC. I've seen 6 p.m. curfews in LA and 2 p.m. curfews. And I've seen people placing curfews extremely early. I mean, it's at 7 o'clock. It's still daytime here in DC.
You're barely getting out of work at the hospital.
Like you're barely out of work, right? That's the curfew for no one can be out. Which what it does is it allows, you know, we're out here protesting police brutality. And it allows for cops, it gives them free reign to use brutalizing and violent tactics to make sure that people are out of the streets. It almost gives them the push, the wind in their backs to say, no, go out and get these people because they're breaking the curfew. But again, it is our constitutional right to assemble. We have a right to protest. And if we are allowing our local governments, because of whatever political persuasions we may hold, to enact impromptu laws that violate the constitutional rights of the people, imagine what else we will allow. It is a creeping compromise that we cannot give into. I get it. I get people saying, hey, we want to make sure we're staying safe and all that. But ask yourself, why didn't they enact these kinds of curfews when white men holding big assault rifles, like big time guns, were storming the Capitol? Literally in state capitals, in government buildings. State capitals. Why didn't they put in curfews? Why didn't they bring out militarized police forces? I mean, no riot gear. No riot. I'm out here in DC. The DEA, the Customs and Border Patrol is out there, the FBI, the military police, of course, the DC local police. Like, I'm telling you, it is a military occupation. It's a war zone. It's a war zone out here. And yet, yet I didn't see a single person carrying an assault rifle or any type of weapon openly. Perhaps someone had a handgun or something on them. I don't doubt that. And that's their right to do so currently. But these people are walking in with these large guns, and the response is totally different. And so you have to ask yourself, could it be that they responded that way to these white men precisely because they are white men? Could it be that they're responding to these black and brown people who make up a large majority of the individuals who are protesting across the nation precisely because they are black and brown? So what do we need to do? We need to stand for righteous justice. Amen. And I think that means supporting these protests. That's good. That's beautiful. Yeah, I just wrote some stuff there. March, donate, bail funds, get supplies, vote, get on the census. Oh, yes. Oof. Oh, yes. Vote. Yeah, that's very important. Man, that's so true, man. We're literally seeing racist policies, right? Impromptu curfews being done in front of our eyes. And so it's easy to make that logical conclusion that if they can make it here, where else can we find it in this whole system? And you'll find just like when you have a house and you find, you know, there's mold somewhere, you start ripping up the houses or the carpets and it's everywhere. Right. So it's important for us to realize that and say, hey, we got to keep our people in check that supposedly represent us in high places. But Garrison, what are some resources in terms of getting educated? You go ahead. I have two, but I'm sure you have a bunch because I'm excited to hear about yours. I have 4 resources. I think there's a book that was written for the time that we're living in. It is this one right here. It is Where Do We Go From Here? Ooh. And of course, the tagline here is chaos or community.
That's good.
That's the moment that we're living in. The decision that we need to really ask ourselves when America is no longer burning and rioting and polarizing, what will we rebuild? Are we going to rebuild a world that lends itself to chaos, or are we going to rebuild a world that is truly oriented towards community? Martin Luther King Jr. is often quoted by those who seek to silence righteous protests. But I challenge you, if you've ever thought, well, what would MLK do? Or we need an MLK, read his words.
Yes.
Read his words. Allow yourself to be educated, not by the colonized, MLK that after his death, they've taken him and
hijacked
words and white-splained him in a way that allows for him to be in alignment with the very people that sought to kill him, that did kill him. Or will you read the words of the radical Martin Luther King Jr., who was killed for these very words, for these very thoughts and these beliefs? Wow. MLK, where do we go from here? Very important book.
That's good. That's a good one.
Second book. I'm going to stagger this. So you mentioned Stand from the Beginning by this very author, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi. Ibram Kendi writes this book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. It is the clearest explanation of anti-racism and the necessity of anti-racism that I've ever read. If you are a person, I believe you. You say, hey, I'm not racist. I'm against racism. I don't want to be a racist person. I want to make sure the racism ends. If you believe that, I believe you that you say that. Then you have to read this book. You don't have an option.
I will say though, it is in back order. I think this one and the one that Logan recommended. What's about white people? How to
Robin DiAngelo probably.
Yeah.
I mean, if Amazon, if
Amazon and a lot of the bookstores have been, those two books are the ones that you can't. I mean, they're in back, which is a great thing. It's a great.
That's great. I'll say this: if you can, Google search a local bookstore, preferably a Black-owned bookstore.
Yeah, that's it.
And go and buy it from there. And honestly, this is an appeal on a broader level. Buy from Black-owned places. As an anti-racist, that's important. Black-owned businesses need to be supported. Of course, I can repeat that for Asian American and Pacific Islander-owned businesses. And of course, Latinx businesses. That's important. But please, go find this book and honestly find it locally. I almost guarantee you they have it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, two more and then I'll be done. This next one is a very small book that everyone can read really, really quickly. It's On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. Listen, this book is like a masterclass on how to change things. If you want to see like things in this world change, if you want to engage in, of course, like political change, this is a really important, very, very small book.
Who's the author?
Just 20 Lessons. It's by Timothy Snyder. So On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century. Got this from Suzanne Ochai. Shout out. Okay. And the last one, this is for my Black brothers and sisters who may be watching this right now. There is so much going on in this world that is wearing on our mental health.
Yep.
And this book is ministry in many ways. This one is so important. I mean, this does not, of course, negate going to get professional mental health counseling, which I really highly recommend for all people. I don't care who you are, where you're from. Everyone needs professional mental health counseling. Absolutely. But in a time where not everyone has the resources or the insurance to do that, I understand that. Start here. If you can't, and this is a serious, if you cannot go to a professional in person or virtually or what have you, get this book and start working through some things. Just a powerful book. One of the ideas that it introduces is one's psychological fortitude, being able to measure where you are on that spectrum and then being able to adjust your life in a way that helps you to preserve your psychological fortitude. Very important, by Dr. Rita Walker. So The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health.
I like that. And I'll just throw in two books here.
Thank you, Garrison. Yep.
I haven't started yet because Chantal's been reading it, but The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness. We've spoken a little bit there, but just how was it said, right? Oh, there's no more Jim Crow laws. Segregation's done. We can all drink from the same water fountain. But to see how it's only the same racist beliefs and practices are still being done. They've just morphed and they look different. And if you're not aware of it, then you're gonna miss and see it. And this last one here, back where Garrison was saying about Ibram Kendi. This book has, the way I know that this is a historical factual book is that he's not afraid to critique the very people the Black community that he represents, right? So you know, many times in history we see how it was written by certain people for certain people. They're gonna gloss over. That's why we know the Bible. That's one of the reasons we know the Bible's true, because we don't hide the ugly. And Ibram Kendi does not hide from the fact that he talks about Black individuals that still held racist views. And for me, I'm like, okay, I take that, because he's like, they were doing good, but they could have been doing a lot better, and were even causing more harm than good in not being anti-racist, right? So this is based on, I don't know which one came first. If this
that one came first, came first, and then this one came as.
So you can read those in conjunction. That one will tell you what an anti-racist is, and this will show you what it looks like. Or didn't look like throughout history.
Good. Well said.
So, big books there, amazing. But I think it's our duty for people that are, I would even say in the Black community, but outside, especially more in the white community, as Latinos, Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, wherever, Arabs, wherever you fall, Europeans, wherever you fall in this category, to be informed and educated on not only in talking and having individuals and friends to be able to dialogue with and say, hey, tell me about your experience, but also to see the history and what scholars and educated people have written on these matters and these topics.
I think I found the quote that I was referring to earlier. It says, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing."
Yeah.
And that should give us the idea to do something. Remember to not just be, don't say you're not racist, be anti-racist, because there are going to be moments that that people may see a comment or maybe alluding to a racist idea, and you can't just sit back and say, well, that's them, similar to how the Nazis in Nazi Germany would say, well, I was told that we should kill the Jews, so I only did what I was told, I was just
on orders.
We must realize the importance of doing something. We must be anti-racist, go against the fabrics in our community, in our society that may promote racist ideas, and be vocal to say that stops here.
Yeah. That's good. Any last words, Garrison, Edgar? We good?
Hey, I just want to say thank you to you all, man. I think Edgar just hit the nail on the head, and same thing for you, Sebi. It's just like, it's always so encouraging when non-Black people take a step into the conversation about what's going on in the Black community, particularly, especially with, the lens of empathy and listening and understanding, and saying like, hey, I want to understand more, and I want to do what's best for that community without lecturing. You know what I'm saying? That listening versus lecturing kind of thing is just really powerful. So thank you to you guys as two Latinx brothers who are willing to engage, man, and just like, open up this conversation to a broader audience. Really appreciate y'all, and I'm thankful for your friendship. And so it's really important. And we
appreciate you, Garrison. We love you, man. We love Garrison and all the Blackness that you bring to our friend, right? Yeah, because we do see color, right? Because that color brings unique perspective and experience in life. But under the under the gospel, we are all one. But we're thankful for you. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, I think educating ourselves, listening to others, showing empathy is a great way of trending up, which is what we're all about, right? Of learning and getting better at this thing that we do in life. And so as we do that, I'm confident that we will keep trending up, and we'll keep following where God leads us in being a loving community that sees all people, hears all people, and loves all. So we love you guys. Continue to trend up, and we'll see you in the next episode. Peace.